Hello, thank you for being in a new video. This time I have with me the VIVO V30. Let's unbox it, let's get started. This device has just been announced in Mexico. The launch price is appearing on your screen with its reference in dollars. Although remember that the prices here are not the same as over there. In many occasions, the price in Mexico is usually much higher compared to the price in other regions. But let's uncover this device to see what it has to offer. As you can see at the bottom, we are told that it will have 12 gigabytes of RAM, 512 gigabytes of storage. So we're talking about an aggressive proposition. Remember that Vivo's Y series is an entry-level series, but the V series is a premium mid-range series. And finally, the X series is the top of the range series, although currently in Mexico that series is not being distributed. So let's open this box. And here we have the device that immediately presents us with the main specifications, what the manufacturer specifically wants to highlight. So we start with portrait with intelligent aura light, confirming us that it's going to have a kind of special light on the back in addition to the flash. It also offers us group selfie with 50 megapixels and autofocus. It seems to me that Vivo is one of those manufacturers that has given priority to the front camera. And in this case, it offers us not only high resolution, but also autofocus. Two vital features to have a very good photo. So selfies will be excellent, and then it says Vivo's thinnest phone with a 5000 milliamp battery. The truth is that this device feels extremely thin. And finally, what I was anticipating, 12 gigabytes of RAM, and they still put another 12 gigabytes of extended RAM, i.e. virtual RAM, and finally 512 gigabytes of storage. So, it looks interesting. I'll tell you the rest of its specs in a moment, but for now, let me get it out of this plastic. Let's also take off this glass. And then lastly, we're going to remove this sticker so we can get to know it better. So here it is with me. It's got a pretty reflective design on the back here. Interesting finish on the inside though, which more or less looks like it's water. On the front curved screen is also an interesting element. So let's turn it on and see what else comes in the box. As you notice, we get a special case included. In this case, totally transparent, totally flexible, with semi-rigid edges. Let's see how it looks on it. Well, it looks pretty much the same because the device itself was already quite reflective. So in this case, it seems to me that it doesn't alter its aesthetics too much. Personally, I prefer more the designs that are matte, but in this case, as you saw, very reflective. We also have the quick start guide and some necessary information and documentation, better known as the paperwork of a lifetime. And finally, we have the charger and the cable. We're talking about a powerful 80-watt charger, and it comes here with its USB-A to USB-C cable. It's honestly a very attractive point. Already the fact that it comes with a charger is a good thing, but in this case it's also a very powerful and fast charger, so there is no doubt that it will possibly be one of its strongest points. And finally we have here your key to remove the tray. That's basically all we have in the box. Let me just put everything away and I'll come back to you to take a closer look at the device. And that's it, I've got the device set up in my hands. So next let's take a look at the specs that it has. It's 7.45 millimeters thick and weighs 186 grams. As I anticipated live on the box, it's their thinnest device with a 5 milliamp battery. And it really does feel very thin. It doesn't feel ultra light because it's pretty big, but it does feel very thin. The screen is AMOLED 6.78 inches diagonally, with 120 Hz in its refresh rate, and a peak brightness of 2800 nits. That really is a sky-high brightness, although that brightness will only be used when you're watching HDR content and in some areas of the screen. Still, the screen has a pretty high brightness, so it's very practical as well and very functional. The refresh rate will intelligently change to suit between 60 and 120, or manually you can set either of these two settings. The front camera impresses with 50 megapixels and autofocus. This was already anticipated live on the box, but it doesn't cease to amaze. Before taking the picture, it still does not look well optimized, but after taking the picture, it optimizes the highlights and shadows very well. And obviously the pictures in automatic mode will not be 50 megapixels, but just over 12 megapixels. But in a manual mode, you could enter that special mode, just look at the camera and then go to the more section and then select high resolution. Here I took a picture of myself at that resolution and see how close we can get to notice so much detail. It really is a camera that can be considered spectacular, especially if you care a lot about the smallest details of your whole face here. On the back we have 3 cameras. The main one is 50 megapixels with f1.8 aperture. The ultra wide is also 50 megapixels, in this case with f2.0 aperture. It also has autofocus. So with these 2 cameras you can have a very good photographic system. And the third camera is really just a decoration. It is a camera for depth detection that I do not consider so useful, because there are other manufacturers that with the ultra-wide camera can detect depth, or even with the main camera itself depending on the sensor they use. So this camera I think is not very useful to say. Here I have some examples of the results that these cameras can give us. This is the main camera. Then we have here a result with the ultra-wide camera. And it seems to me that they have a very similar color. Maybe here only in the ultra-wide the green was not so saturated, but I think it's a good color anyway. In this case I also applied 2x zoom. That puts it to me as to keep the optical quality a little bit. And it definitely looks very nice too. Here we have zoom 5x, then 10x. And the highest that leaves us is 20x. Although it starts to feel a little bit more forced in this case, the zoom. I think that 10x is the maximum you can still get while maintaining good quality. So the zoom is not going to be its most outstanding point. But notice how with the main camera we can also take macro shots. If we zoom in a bit, we have this result that seems to me to be of good quality. But what is remarkable is that the ultra-wide camera also has autofocus. So we can zoom in with that camera and focus. Curiously though, the camera doesn't have a macro mode. So notice how in the list of modes that macro mode is not present. But to take macro photography, you simply switch to the ultra-wide camera. And this way it is able to focus at quite short distances. And the portrait photography also has a very good quality. It allows you to take portraits with a 2x zoom while maintaining optical quality, or also with 1x. Obviously the most recommendable will be 2x, and it seems to me that it maintains a good detection of the foreground and background. So as first impressions the camera seems to me to be of good quality, although with the zoom as one of its few weak points. And something impressive is that the screen in conjunction with the cameras, they can display the photos very realistically. That is to say, they support the display of photos with HDR. So this area of the sun on this screen that I'm looking at it has a very high brightness, which gives a lot of realism to the photograph, because in these areas it's a little bit darker, so definitely that it's able to show you photographs with a lot of very high quality. And on this backside it has the aura ring, which is a special light for illuminating portraits, not to be confused with the flash. The flash or flashlight only lights up in this part with a circle, although it is still reflected in the rest of the ring. But the aura ring lights up the whole ring with much more intensity, and the outline of the flash as well. So it can give a different style to portraits. The battery is 5000 milliamps, and it supports 80-watt charging. And the charger is included in the box. Definitely good parameters for a device. Although we will put that charger to the test later on, to see exactly how long it will charge. For now we're just giving it a quick look. As I had already told you, it has 12 gigabytes of RAM, plus another 12 virtual, and 512 gigabytes of storage. Although around the world there are different versions. The most basic starts from 8 gigabytes of RAM, with 128 of storage, and this is the highest configuration. It's IP54 certified, so it's splash resistant, but it can't be submerged. And one of its most attractive points, undoubtedly, is the processor, because it debuts the Snapdragon 7 Gen 3. So let's know more or less the power that can get to offer us this processor, so that we have a reference. So I'll come back when this is done. And ready here we have the scores, 1132 on a single core, and 3229 on multi-core. It's definitely a powerful processor. It gave us very similar numbers. to what we had with the Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1. So it definitely is. It's a processor that could be considered high-end. But you know, we'll do a much more in-depth analysis later on. Gaming, opening apps, editing video, and more on this device. So don't miss that video. Make sure you're subscribed so you won't miss it. For now, we've come to the end of this content. I hope you liked it. If you did, you know you can tell me about it. And see you next time.